Surrender is not defeat. It is trust. It is not the end of effort. It is the beginning of flow. When you stop trying to control life, you discover that life has always been carrying you. Welcome to Osho Motivation. This is the power of surrender. Trusting life completely. Surrender. The word frightens the mind because the mind only knows two positions, control or collapse. It cannot imagine another way. A way where you act without control, move without resistance, and trust without fear. But surrender is not weakness. It is not resignation. It is not giving up on life. It is giving in to life. Surrender is the highest form of intelligence because it arises only when you have seen the futility of struggle, when you have tried everything to change, to fix, to fight, and finally realize that the one trying was the very cause of your suffering. In that moment, something relaxes inside you. A sigh deeper than thought, a stillness that feels ancient. You stop pushing against the current. You allow the river to carry you. And suddenly, everything begins to move effortlessly. Surrender is not the end of effort. It is the end of conflict. You still act, but your action comes from harmony, not resistance. You still think, but your thought arises from clarity, not chaos. You still live, but now you flow with life instead of fighting it. The mind believes it knows what is best. It wants to plan, to predict, to control. But life has its own rhythm, a rhythm that no thought can capture. When you surrender, you begin to dance with that rhythm. You stop dictating the steps. You start listening to the music. In surrender, there is immense peace because all struggle is born from separation. When you fight life, you separate yourself from it. You say, I know better. And in that moment, you create tension, fear, anxiety. But when you surrender, you remember that you are not separate. You are part of the same intelligence that moves the stars, that grows the trees, that beats your heart without your permission. This is surrender, to trust that life knows what it is doing, even when you don't. It doesn't mean you become passive. Surrender is not sitting in a corner waiting for miracles. Surrender is deep participation without attachment. It is doing your best, but letting go of the need to control the result. It is action born from trust, not fear. When you live this way, a strange transformation happens. The same life that once felt heavy begins to feel light. The same problems that once felt personal begin to appear as lessons. And every obstacle becomes an opportunity to deepen your trust. The ego cannot surrender. It can only pretend. Because the ego exists through control. Its entire identity depends on the illusion that I am the one doing. But when awareness awakens, you see that life was moving long before you decided to move. Your breath was flowing long before you learned to breathe. Your heart was beating before you knew what a heart was. So who is really in control? When this question penetrates deeply, control begins to fall away naturally. You stop forcing, you stop demanding, you stop arguing with existence, and in that letting go, you discover something you had never known before, a quiet power, a grace that guides without effort. This grace is surrender. When you surrender, you don't become smaller. You become infinite because you dissolve into something larger than yourself. You stop being a drop trying to control the ocean and you realize you are the ocean. The mind says, "But what if things go wrong?" Surrender replies, "They never do. They only go the way they must." When you trust, even your so-called mistakes become blessings. Even your delays serve your growth. You start to see that existence is compassionate. It gives you exactly what you need, not what you want. In surrender, you stop dividing experiences into good and bad, success and failure, pleasure and pain. You start seeing everything as one flow, one movement of life expressing itself in infinite forms. And once you see that, you begin to relax deeply, because now, even when things don't go your way, they are going the way of life. And life's way is always the right way. Surrender does not mean you stop caring. It means you care without fear. You live fully but lightly. You act deeply but without clinging. You give yourself completely to this moment, knowing that this moment is all there ever is. To surrender is to live with total openness. It is to say yes to whatever comes, the joy, the sorrow, the birth, the death, the rise, the fall. You stop saying, "Why me?" and start saying, "Yes, this too." Because you see that everything that comes from the same source. And that source is wise beyond imagination. Surrender is not an act. It is understanding. It is the recognition that control was always an illusion. You were never holding life. Life was holding you. You were never managing the universe. The universe was carrying you all along. The moment you realize this, a deep gratitude arises. Not gratitude for something specific, but gratitude for being, for the sheer miracle of existence itself. This gratitude is the fragrance of surrender. When you smell that fragrance in your heart, you know that you are home. There is an intelligence behind all things. You can feel it when you look at the sky at night. Millions of stars moving in perfect harmony without a single noise of control. You can sense it when you watch a flower bloom without anxiety, without plan, without doubt. Life is not a mistake. It is an orchestra. Every leaf, every wave, every breath is moving in rhythm with something vast, unseen, and sacred. This is the intelligence of existence. The same intelligence that beats your heart, that heals your wounds, that carries you through sleep without your help. It is already doing everything. When you surrender, you align with that intelligence. You stop trying to be the conductor of life and realize you are part of its music. The mind wants to plan, to manage, to ensure outcomes. But awareness sees that life has been unfolding perfectly for billions of years before your thoughts ever appeared. The sun rises without your permission. The rivers flow without your command. And yet somehow you think you must control everything around you. Surrender is remembering that life knows what it is doing. It doesn't need your fear. It only needs your trust. This trust is not naive. It is not blind faith. It is the wisdom of direct experience. The recognition that control has never really worked. You plan and things go another way. You resist and the very thing you fear keeps returning. You fight life and you lose, not because life is cruel, but because life is stronger. It will not bend to your will. It will wait patiently until you stop fighting. The intelligence of life has no ego. It doesn't punish or reward. It simply balances. It brings you exactly the experiences you need to awaken. Sometimes it gives you sweetness. Sometimes it gives you fire. But both serve the same purpose, to bring you closer to awareness. When you begin to trust this intelligence, you stop labeling experiences as good or bad. You see them as necessary movements in your evolution. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start whispering, "Life, I trust you." That one sentence, "Life, I trust you," is enough to dissolve lifetimes of fear. Fear arises only when you believe you are separate, when you think you are an isolated fragment, cut off from the whole. You must protect yourself. You must defend, control, and plan endlessly because you believe it's all up to you. But when you see that you are part of the whole, fear becomes unnecessary. You realize that the wave does not have to fear the ocean. It is the ocean, rising and falling in temporary form. You are that wave, beautiful, temporary, yet infinite in essence. When you live in this realization, you can finally relax. You don't become careless. You become effortless. Your actions remain precise, but they are no longer anxious. Your words are clear, but no longer forced. You move with life's rhythm instead of trying to set your own. This is what it means to flow. Flow is not laziness. It is intelligence in motion. When you flow, you act at the right time, in the right way, without struggle. This effortless harmony is the true meaning of surrender. You are no longer the driver. You are the vehicle through which life moves, and the ride becomes beautiful because the driver knows the way better than you do. Fear says, "What if I lose everything?" Surrender says, "You cannot lose what is real." Fear says, "What if I fail?" Surrender says, "There is no failure, only learning." Fear says, "I must protect myself." Surrender says, "Life is already protecting me." This trust changes everything. When you trust, even pain feels sacred because you know it is not meaningless. You understand that storms come to clear the sky, that endings are simply beginnings in disguise. The intelligence of life is not random, it is precise. So precise that even your mistakes are part of its design. You meet exactly the people you need to meet at exactly the right moment to learn exactly what you need to learn. Every encounter, every delay, every detour has purpose. But the mind cannot see that in the moment because it is too impatient, too focused on its own agenda. When you look back, you realize that everything that ever happened led you here to this moment of awakening, to this understanding, to this surrender. Surrender is not passive acceptance, it is active trust. You do what you can, but you no longer believe you are the master. You participate joyfully without the arrogance of ownership. A flower blooms when it is time. The river reaches the sea in its own way. And you too are moving toward your flowering. You too are being guided The universe is not outside of you. It breathes through you, thinks through you, loves through you. You are life expressing itself in human form. When this realization deepens, surrender becomes natural. You no longer fight to survive. You start to live. You no longer cling to certainty. You rest in mystery. And that mystery becomes your home. To live in surrender is to live in wonder. You stop pretending to know. You stop trying to control outcomes. You become curious, open, ready to be surprised by life. And life, when trusted, becomes a miracle. It brings you exactly what your soul needs, not what your mind desires. The mind desires comfort. The soul seeks growth. The mind wants safety. The soul wants freedom. When you surrender, you choose the path of the soul, and though it may take you through uncertainty, it always leads you home. There is no safer place than surrender, because when you surrender, you are in alignment with truth. You are no longer swimming against the current of existence. Surrender doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means your dreams are no longer born from fear. They arise from joy. You still create, but creation becomes play, not pressure. You still work, but work becomes expression, not survival. You still plan, but you hold your plans lightly, like a bird resting in your hand, free to stay, free to fly, in surrender. You live fully. You taste life deeply, but you do not cling. You love wholeheartedly, but you do not possess. You experience everything, but you remain free. This is the beauty of surrender. It gives you the courage to live without walls. You become open to everything life brings. The laughter and the loss, the sunshine and the rain. And in that openness, you discover your true strength. Because real strength is not control. It is vulnerability without fear. You stop pretending to be in charge. You become real, raw, human. You cry when it hurts. You laugh when it's beautiful. You dance when it rains. You rest when it's time. You stop demanding and start receiving. And the more you receive, the more grateful you become. Gratitude grows in the soil of surrender. It blooms naturally when you realize that everything is a gift. Even the challenges are gifts because they make you softer, they make you wiser. They bring you closer to truth. Surrender is the key that opens the door to peace. Not peace as an idea, but peace as your natural state. When you stop trying to be in control, you stop being in conflict. And what remains is silence. A silence filled with trust. A silence that says, "Life, I am yours." And when you say that, when you truly mean it, you feel something extraordinary, as if the whole existence smiles back at you. Because it was always waiting for you to let go, waiting for you to return home. To surrender does not mean to stop living. It means to start living more fully than ever before. Because when control disappears, presence begins. You start moving not from effort, but from ease, not from the mind's pressure, but from the heart's rhythm. This is what I call the sacred flow, the effortless alignment of action and awareness. In this flow, life moves through you, but you no longer claim ownership of it. You become a transparent channel. through which existence expresses itself freely. You speak, but the words arise by themselves. You act, but there is no doer behind the action. It is as if the wind blows through you and you simply become the moment. This is true creativity, true living. It is not mechanical repetition. It is spontaneous participation. Every moment becomes fresh, alive, unrepeatable. When you live in the sacred flow, you discover that the universe is intelligent beyond measure. It guides your steps without confusion. It orchestrates your life with precision and grace. The mind wants to lead, but awareness learns to follow. The mind plans, but awareness listens. And in that listening, you begin to sense the subtle music of life. When you listen deeply, you realize that life has always been speaking. Through the whispers of intuition, through the signals of synchronicity, through the quiet knowing that comes when the mind is still. Surrendered awareness is not blind obedience. It is deep responsiveness. It is not that you stop making choices. It's that your choices are no longer born from fear. You act from clarity, not compulsion. You respond from stillness, not reaction. You move when life moves, and you rest when life rests. That rhythm is perfection itself. The sacred flow cannot be forced. It can only be allowed. When you force, you create resistance. When you allow, you enter grace. Grace is the natural state of the surrendered soul. It is the feeling of being carried, not because you are lazy, but because you are aligned. You begin to see that life has always been taking care of you. Even when you didn't understand how, even in your hardest moments, something inside you was being shaped, softened, prepared. You see that nothing was wasted. Every tear, every loss, every waiting season was part of your unfolding. This realization is liberation. It frees you from regret and resentment, because now you understand that life was never against you. It was sculpting you into awareness. When you live in surrender, you become like a river. You don't resist the bends or the rocks. You move around them, over them, through them. And eventually, you reach the ocean, not by force, but by flowing. The river never doubts the ocean. It knows that every obstacle is part of the journey. You too can live like this, trusting each moment as a necessary step in your becoming. The sacred flow of surrender makes life poetic again. You stop surviving. You start dancing. You stop running. You start walking in rhythm. You stop shouting. You start listening. And in that listening, you begin to hear the divine pulse beating inside everything. In the laughter of a child, in the stillness of trees, in the sound of your own breath. When you are in this state, you realize that the divine is not something far away. It is what moves your hand, what blinks your eyes, what speaks through your voice. God is not watching you. God is breathing as you. The moment you understand this, your whole relationship with life changes. You stop seeing it as something to control and begin to experience it as something sacred. Washing a cup becomes prayer. Walking becomes meditation. Silence becomes communion, because now you are not the doer. You are the vessel. This is the beauty of surrendered awareness. It brings holiness into the ordinary. You no longer need temples or rituals. Every breath becomes sacred. Surrendered action is not passivity. It is the highest form of participation. You give your total energy to this moment, but you hold nothing back for results. You work, but without worry. You love, but without fear. You live, but without clinging. And that paradox, full engagement without attachment, is the very essence of freedom. People often think surrender means losing direction. But the truth is, you only lose confusion. Direction comes naturally. When you stop interfering, you become guided not by the mind, but by a deeper intelligence, the same one that tells birds when to migrate, that tells flowers when to bloom. This guidance is always available, but it cannot be heard through noise. It speaks in silence, in subtle feelings, in sudden clarity that arises for no reason. To hear it, you must become still. Because the sacred flow is not loud, it is gentle, like a whisper from within. When you start living from this surrendered awareness, you will notice synchronicities. Things will begin to align effortlessly. People will appear at the right moment. Doors will open that you never planned for. And sometimes, what you thought was a closed door was only protecting you from something that was not meant for you. This is how the universe moves. Not through logic, but through love. Not through plans, but through timing. Trust that timing. Even delays have meaning. Even pauses are preparation. When you surrender, you realize that you are never stuck. You are always being guided. The sacred flow may not take you where you want it to go, but it will always take you where you need to be. And the more you trust it, the more it reveals its intelligence. Your life begins to feel lighter because you are no longer dragging the weight of should. You live not from obligation, but from inspiration. Inspiration is the fragrance of surrender. When you are inspired, you are breathing with life. That's what the word means. In spirit. You are in spirit, in alignment, in flow. And in that state, your work becomes art. Your words become healing. Your silence becomes power. You begin to radiate peace without trying. Because peace is no longer something you seek. It is what you are when resistance ends. In this sacred flow, you also rediscover love. Not the love that depends on someone, but the love that flows through everything. You realize that surrender and love are the same movement. To love is to surrender. To surrender is to love. Because in both, the ego disappears and only life remains. You can test this truth in small moments. When you surrender to laughter, you laugh freely. When you surrender to music, you dance effortlessly. When you surrender to silence, you hear eternity. The same is true for life. When you surrender to it, you start to live effortlessly. Nothing changes on the outside, but everything changes within. The struggle ends, the fear fades, the noise quiets, and what remains is a vast peace, a silent joy, a steady flow. This is the state of surrendered awareness, fully alive. Utterly still, you live as a paradox, doing without doing, moving without moving, loving without trying. This is the secret that the sages have whispered for centuries, that when you let go, everything comes to you. When you stop chasing, you are found. When you stop controlling, you are carried. This is the sacred flow. The invisible river that takes you home. When surrender becomes your way of being, trust stops being an effort. It becomes your nature. You no longer have to remind yourself to relax. You simply cannot hold tension anymore. You no longer have to say, I must let go, because there is no one left to hold on. You live like the sky, vast, open, untouched. Clouds may pass, storms may come, but you remain the quiet space through which everything moves. Nothing sticks, nothing stays. Everything flows through you, and you flow through everything. This is the gift of surrender. The freedom to live without fear, without the weight of control. You act with totality, but without attachment to outcome. You love deeply, but without the anxiety of loss. You walk through the world, but your heart remains anchored in silence. When surrender ripens into trust, you become soft and strong at once. Soft because resistance has melted, strong because nothing can shake you. You no longer see life as friend or enemy. You see it as yourself. Every event, every encounter, every breath is recognized as sacred movement, existence experiencing itself through you. There is a joy that arises only in this state, a joy without reason, a peace that doesn't depend on conditions. It is the joy of being aligned, the peace of being one with the whole. Now you live as trust itself. You don't trust someone or something. You are trust. You are surrender. You are flow. And when you live this way, life opens its heart completely. It reveals its beauty, its timing, its perfect intelligence. The river carries you, the wind whispers your song, and silence becomes your language. You realize there was never anything to surrender to, because there was never anything separate from you. You are not in life. You are life. And to live as life itself is the highest surrender of all. Thank you for listening to Osho Motivation. Remember, the moment you surrender, you stop surviving and start living. Trust the flow. Trust existence. Trust yourself. Silence. Awareness. Freedom.